work that we are looking at, PhD works that we are looking at. All right. So we are starting now. The first thing that we need to know is what is plagiarism? Now, are you all right? Plagiarism is literary theft. That is, when we steal from other people's academics, other people's works. And stealing in any given context is not right. All right. So, this is one form of stealing, and it is immoral, it is unethical, and it emerged, a concept of it emerged in the 18th century. You know, towards the end of the 18th and beginning of the 19th, with the Romantic poets, the Romantic writers, and they found that the original could be identified by one's original ideas. Right? They believed in originality. All right. So, what is originality? Originality represents a writer's own thoughts as they are. For example, we have Wordsworth, the poet, and he talks about originality. What is the originality that he's talking about? See, the poet goes on a walk. He sees nature all around him and he writes about it. He may write about a song, he may write about a bird, he may write about a tree. Now, if I were to write the same thing, then I'm not being original. You understand? If I take lines from the poet and say they are mine, then I'm not original. I am plagiarizing. And now, we have to understand that originality is mandatory in today's research. Now you're going to say, ma'am, that's a very difficult prospect. How do I maintain originality? I have read books, reference books, and my ideas are based upon those references. That's a definite question that you're going to ask me. Now, we can purloin or steal a person's ideas We can steal a person's language. We can steal figurative language that links us back to the original author. Plagiarism is not yet a crime, but it is a punishable offense. You can get a punishment if your work is plagiarized. Now, I'm not talking about teachers. Teachers don't plagiarize, but students do. So if you encourage a student to plagiarize, that means you have plagiarized. All right. Now, plagiarism comes from a Latin word which means kidnapping. Kidnapping is wrong. None of us wants to be a kidnapper. So plagiarism is kidnapping. Let's see. The Latin word is plagiaris. Plagiarism is illegal towards the reader, the patron, the supervisor, the teacher. It results in the loss of credibility and integrity for the writer, for the plagiarist. And any kind of fabrication of data is also plagiarism. So there are lots and lots of avenues of plagiarism. And these avenues are many. And we have to understand them all. Now, what I want to do is give you some definitions of plagiarism before we go any further. So, Stanford University defines plagiarism as the use without giving reasonable and appropriate credit to or acknowledging the author or source of another person's original work. Whether such work is made up of code, formulas, ideas, language, research, strategies, writing, or other form. So you see, it can be codes, formulas, ideas, language, research, strategies, writing. Oxford University, the use of a writer's ideas or phraseology without giving due credit. So how do we give due credit? We cite the source, right? We quote, we give a reference. Yale, the use of another's work words or ideas. Or other original material without acknowledging the source. All right. Now, for the benefit of other language speakers, let us discuss a little bit in Hindi. So, हम लोग बात कर रहे हैं plagiarism. Now, plagiarism means आपने किसी और का काम अपने नाम से छाप दिया. ठीक? जब हम किसी और का काम अपने नाम से छापेंगे तो हम गलत कर रहे हैं, क्योंकि ये लिटरेरी थेफ्ट है. चोरी है. The word plagiarism means kidnapping, अगवा करना. जैसे कि हम किसी और की प्रॉपर्टी को ले नहीं सकते. अगर हमारे नेबर का फ्लैट है, हम उसमें घुस के रहने नहीं लग सकते. Now, that would be wrong. It would be very criminal to do such a thing. इसी तरह से हम दूसरे का काम अपने नाम से छपवा नहीं सकते. हम सिर्फ काम की बात नहीं कर रहे हैं, हम बात कर रहे हैं आइडियाज की, हम बात कर रहे हैं फॉर्मूला की, हम बात कर रहे हैं कोड्स की, ग्राफ्स की. हम कुछ नहीं ले सकते. हमने किताब से लिया वो भी गलत है अगर हमने साइट नहीं किया उसको. प्लेजरिज्म गलत है टीचर्स के लिए. अपने टीचर को आपने शर्मिंदा किया, अपने पेट्रन को, सुपरवाइजर को, मेंटर को, यूनिवर्सिटी को. और ये बात बहुत तेज फैलती है. रिसर्चर के लिए ये बहुत शर्मिंदगी की बात है कि प्लेजरिज्म पकड़ा जाए. All right. Now we move a little ahead. Any problems so far?
No, ma'am. No, ma'am.
All right.
No, ma'am.
So, हम प्लेजरिज्म करते क्यों? देखिए, एक इम्पोर्टेंट वजह ये है कि स्कूल में जब हम क्लासेस अटेंड करते थे, हमारी टीचर्स हमें एक टेक्स्ट बुक से पढ़ाती थी. ये तो आपको याद होगा. और टेक्स्ट बुक को लेके वो लेसन कंप्लीट करती थी, रीड करती थी. एंड व्हाट वुड हैपन वाज दैट वी वुड be told कि यहाँ से यहाँ तक आप answer 1 mark कर लीजिए. Do you remember that?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Then you learnt it up by heart, and you wrote it in the exam or the test, and your teacher said, very good. Did that happen? That happened. अब हमें ये समझ में आया that this is what we have to do. We have to take lines from the text and memorize. All right. So we have to take the lines from the text and memorize them. अब हमें तो ये नहीं किसी ने बताया कि ये प्लेजरिज्म है. अब अचानक हमसे कहा जा रहा है कि आप प्लेजराइज ना करें. That is why it's difficult, because ये हमको एक learning method already सिखा दिया गया है. So it becomes very difficult for children, if they have studied through this method, to give up. So this becomes a source of plagiarism. And now we go on to something called self-plagiarism. Self-plagiarism means referring to your own work, quoting from your own work. You can quote from your work, you can give yourself a citation, but you cannot reuse even your own material. That is wrong. To even reuse material from your last article. Now, take a note on self-plagiarism. Self-plagiarism refers to the reuse of significant, identical, portions of one's own work without acknowledging that one is doing so. Or without citing sources. So self-plagiarism can also be very dangerous. Now, how to avoid all these things? That is the big question before us. We have understood what plagiarism is. We have understood the seriousness of plagiarism. See, the seriousness is that in the academic circles, plagiarism by students, researchers, and teachers is considered a fraud. It is considered a fraud, and offenders are subjected to punishment. And one can even be terminated or rusticated. A teacher's services can be terminated and students can be rusticated. All right. Now, sometimes plagiarism happens because people lose their work. They have a paper to read tomorrow and it disappears from the computer. Then what to do? So they write in a hurry and a lot of it may be plagiarized. Then in longer works like PhD thesis or books, the scrutiny should be more careful because they're going to be published. They're going to be before a wider audience. And it should not result in sacrificing one's career. All right? You see, it is supposed to enhance your career, not sacrifice your career. So you have to be careful about that your career doesn't get sacrificed due to plagiarism. And this news spreads like wildfire. In academic circles, it spreads very fast that there's been a plagiarism in such and such department in such and such university. And that can be very embarrassing and insulting. The record of plagiarism, it follows one throughout life. That this person lost his PhD position due to plagiarism. So let us conclude what we have done up till now to see what we have. So what we have is that plagiarism is a double-edged weapon. First you plagiarize. People steal content and then they lie about it. So one is worse than the other. In a research paper, plagiarism combines what other researchers have said about the subject. Now, you're perfectly free to do that, to talk about what other researchers have said, but you must cite it. You must give the relevant references. One common confusion that we all may experience is that it is difficult to decide where the critic's ideas end and where do mine begin. Sometimes this becomes a line which is not clear. So the golden rule is, when in doubt, cite. CITE. Quote sources. Do not lose your sources. Keep noting them while you are writing. Now, sometimes there is inadvertent plagiarism. That means we don't mean to plagiarize, but it happens. And that is that we are trying to write from memory. And sometimes in our memories, the ideas of other people dominate. And we let them overpower our own ideas. Now, any questions so far? Anything that I can clarify?
No, ma'am.
No, ma'am. It's clear, ma'am.
Sure?
Yes, ma'am.
Ma'am, can I ask something?
Yes?
Ma'am, this is regarding the quotations that we use. So in a certain paper, I had used less than 20% of quotations from secondary sources and around, again, less than 20% of quotations from the primary sources, that is the textual quotations. But then too, this could not clear the range of given by the editors as far as plagiarism was concerned, and although they were all in quotes and they were all cited, but it could not clear the clearances given for plagiarism. What can be done in such an instance? Should we all and then convert all of them into indirect speech and just give it to the editor, saying that okay, this is out of any kind of inverted commas and we have rephrased everything? Or should we not use quotations at all?
No, see, we cannot convert it into indirect speech. Number one. Number two, I think usually they ask for a total of 20%. You did 40%.
Yes, but then that was because I had quoted from the text and then I had quoted from the critics who had commented on the text. So, and this was also one of the prerequisites of the chapter, that we are supposed to do it. But then, of course, they did not give us a percentage. So I did it very enthusiastically, and then this is how it failed.
Because, quotations enhance the work, but you're supposed to do a total of 20% of citation.
Okay, ma'am.
So
Ma'am, I
try.
have just, yeah. Yes, yes. Um, Ma'am, I have just one request. Actually, we are all nearing lunchtime, and I don't know about the others, but I'm keeping away from any kind of food so that I don't get distracted and I take your notes. If we see you munching, ma'am, even we get urges. It would be very kind of you if you could resist this. Thank you very much, ma'am.
I'm actually chewing on long for my cough.
I do understand, ma'am.
Yes,
But
so
the urge works. So
it is.
thank you.
But you're free to eat. Go ahead.
Thank you, ma'am.
All right. So now, now we come to another context, and that is sometimes work needs to be reused. Now, how do we reuse and how do we decide what work is to be reused? Now, number one, to form the background for a new contribution. Now, we are writing an essay, and we need a background that this work was done, this work was done, and that work was done. So we reuse work in the second work, the new work, and we say that this is part of what I presented in such a place, in such a journal. Then sometimes we need the previous work in order to deal with new evidence or argument. New evidence or argument. And a third place is where audience is different, so that publishing the same work in different places was necessary. Now you see, like we might have lectures on COVID-19, awareness lectures. Now we go from one place to another, and what we do is that we repeat the lecture. The health worker repeats the lecture. All right. So, if the lecture is repeated, is it plagiarism? All right. He may give the same lecture in this village, move on to the next village, and deliver the same lecture. Now, when we get there, we ask a question. Is it plagiarism? This is not plagiarism because this is for public welfare. Now, we also said to form the background. Now, in order to form the background, for example, when we are citing a new experiment, we need to say that this work was done. And you know, in the sciences, we always have to provide a background. So that's where this is more essential. And finally, portions of previous work must be repeated in order to deal with new evidence. You know, you have to prove the last evidence wrong and deal with new evidence. All right. So these are exceptions. Now I have some discussion on how to detect plagiarism. You see, when we teach a class, the student thinks that the student is very clever. Now, in the COVID days, all students were plagiarizing. Did that happen in your class? Were you teaching then? Did you teach online?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. So
And we
when
had
you
those
were
open book
teaching,
exams
Yes,
for
ma'am.
at least so many semesters.
yes. So when you were doing that, did the students plagiarize?
Everything.
Yes. तो आपने कैसे सॉल्व किया इसको?
Ma'am, सबके marks एक होते थे because everybody used to write the same thing.
राइट. हमें स्टूडेंट्स को अवेयर करना पड़ेगा कि इंटरनेट इज एक्सेसिबल टू ऑल. हमें भी पता है इंटरनेट पे क्या है. Right? That is one thing we have to tell them. Then you have to do your own plagiarism check for the students. How do we do that? One is a very easy way that you type a portion of their essay or scan a portion of the essay and check it on the net. There are many free plagiarism checkers. We can do that, or we can simply show our knowledge of plagiarism. Then they will not be able to cheat on us. So, you tell them that if it is on the net, I'll find it. Right. Then students will be a little cautious. When you are checking a thesis, students will bring neat and clean chapters. Ask them to bring their rough notes. The rough notes will tell you how much thought has gone into this particular writing. That is a very good way of finding out. Right? So the student will be very, very cautious. Then, what we have to be very careful about is not violating our own rules. If I have said so, I will also stick to it. Okay? If I have said so, I will also stick to it. I never plagiarize, so you don't plagiarize. I never cut and paste from the internet, so you don't do it either. That is the rule that students follow. And whatever assignments you give your students should be original. If you repeat last year's, then they're going to plagiarize. And they will plagiarize from the internet. They will plagiarize from senior students' copies. They will ask relatives to write for them. So, I met this girl and I said, what course are you going to take? So she says, whatever my sister has been doing, so that I get her notes firsthand. So that's a strategy they often use. For the sake of notes, she's going to do what her elder sister did. Then discuss plagiarism with the students. Tell them it is plagiarism if you take notes from a senior, if you ask a parent to help you, if somebody writes your essay for you. Not just cutting and pasting from the net. And another important thing is that we have to give adequate time. Plenty of time to students to complete their assignments. If we get into a hurry, then they're likely to resort to plagiarism. And we should be involved in the creative process. Right? हमें उनके लिखने में इन्वॉल्व होना पड़ेगा. हमें उनके रफ नोट्स देखने हैं, हमें उनके आइडियाज को डिस्कस करना है. अगर हम डिस्कस करेंगे तब हमको पता चलेगा कि ये इनके ओरिजिनल आइडियाज है कि नहीं. हमें उन्हें समझाना है कि इट इज प्लेजरिज्म इफ अगर हम उनके कोई रिलेटिव, ट्यूटर, मेंटर, कोई भी सीनियर उन्हें उनके काम के साथ हेल्प कर रहा है. राइट? ओरिजिनलिटी तब आएगी ही नहीं. अगर ऐसे होगा तो ओरिजिनलिटी आएगी ही नहीं काम में. फिर हमें मॉनिटर करना है what they are reading. That is very important. अगर वो सिर्फ स्पार्क नोट्स पढ़ रहे हैं तो वो वहां से लिखेंगे। लेकिन अगर वो एक्चुअल बुक्स पढ़ रहे हैं तो उनको their vision will broaden. हर स्टूडेंट की डिफिकल्टी अलग होती है। फॉर एग्जाम्पल, किसी को रीडिंग डिफिकल्टी है, किसी की राइटिंग डिफिकल्टी है, किसी की लिसनिंग है, किसी की स्पीकिंग है। अगर हमें पता चल जाए कि किस स्टूडेंट की क्या स्पेसिफिक डिसेबिलिटी है तो हम उस हिसाब से मदद कर सकते हैं। सो दिस इज समथिंग वी हैव टू फाइंड आउट। अगर राइटिंग डिफिकल्टी है तो देर आर लैब्स like OWL, OWL, online writing lab, online writing lab, और ये हेल्प भी कर देते हैं। स्टूडेंट्स अगर अपने आर्टिकल्स भेजे तो ये हेल्प भी कर देंगे। और दिस इज पर्ड्यू यूनिवर्सिटी, PURDUE, Purdue University. There is something called style sheets, like MLA style sheet, Modern Language Association. ये स्टाइल शीट हमें बताती है कि हमें किस तरह से लिखना है। ऑल राइट, तो बेसिकली आप भी बता सकते हैं कि किस तरह से लिखना है। तो उसमें आप इंक्लूड करिए कि यूज कोटेशन मार्क्स, when in doubt use a citation, annotate research notes, with complete sources. Annotate research notes with complete sources. Understand how easy plagiarism is to commit and to trace. You see, that's the issue with plagiarism. It can be committed very easily, but it can be traced equally easily. Now, plagiarism is, I would say, that we are very scared of plagiarism. It looks like a monster whom we cannot decipher. But the point is that ultimately it is not so scary. Why not so scary? Because we can go for plagiarism check. अब आपका plagiarism check में आ गया 40% plagiarism. Now that's not an insult. That is a kind of a report card. And you can sit down and remove the plagiarism. So that substantially reduces it. Then in PhDs, 10% plagiarism is allowed. हर यूनिवर्सिटी का अपना रूल होता है, लेकिन हमारे यहाँ फॉर एग्जाम्पल 10% is allowed, 10 and below. And students come and they say, I have 6%, I have 7%. So they're very happy and they're allowed to submit. Now, one thing that students have to understand is that developing good skills is part of college education. You know, sometimes we are deliberately casual. Students can be very casual. For example, if you take a college student's copy, taking notes, how many of them have put the date? They were all doing it in school. Up till high school, they were all doing it. And after high school, they stopped doing it. And in college, they deliberately destroyed their handwriting. Then, in college, they deliberately lost their speaking skills. Now, I'm saying deliberately because they are trying to be one with the crowd, perhaps. So, a lot of people uh, undermine their skills when they are in college or lose them. So, what are the points that we would use to define the perfect paper? Number one, the paper demonstrates clarity of expression. Number two is free from spelling and grammatical mistakes. You know, you can use the spell check, the grammar check, whatever subject you are dealing with, use technical vocabulary. Vocabulary of the register. And every paper should have a carefully laid out bibliography and citations. You see, the way we can give good citations is that while we are reading, we note the references. Otherwise, I have seen researchers running around looking for the reference at the time of the submission. We now go on to types of plagiarism. Number one, clone. So clone is submitting someone else's work word for word as one's own, submitting someone else's work word for word as one's own. Next is Control C. That is a written piece that contains significant portions of the text from a single source without alteration. A written piece that contains significant portions of the text from a single source, not even multiple sources, single source without alterations. So that's direct plagiarism. Find, replace. Find, replace, the act of changing keywords and phrases but retaining the essential content of the source in a paper. The act of changing keywords and phrases but retaining the essential content of the source in a paper. Next, remix. An act of paraphrasing from all other sources, an act of paraphrasing from all other sources and making the content fit together. Remix is an act of paraphrasing from other sources and making the content fit together. Recycle. The act of borrowing generously from one's own work without citation. That is to self-plagiarize. It's always good to give yourself a citation, right? If you can add your own name to the list of critics that you have read, you get one more citation. Hybrid. The act of combining perfectly cited sources with copied passages without citation in one paper. The act of combining perfectly cited sources with copied passages without citation in one paper. That is hybrid. Mashup, a paper that presents a mix of copied material from several different sources without proper citation. (404) error. Is a written piece that includes citations to non-existent or inadequate information. Yes,
सोशल से माइक ऑफ कर लीजिए.
aggregator.
सोशल
Aggregator includes proper citation but the paper includes almost no original work. The aggregator includes proper citation, but the paper includes almost no original work. Retweet. The paper includes proper citation, but relies too closely on the text, original wording, that is quotations from the text, or structure. All right. So these are the types of plagiarism. Now, there are many style sheets that will help you to check plagiarism and to write properly. So we have the MLA, Modern Language Association, APA, American Psychological Association, LSA, Linguistic Society of America. Linguistic Society of America. Now, there are some plagiarism checkers. So, I'll give you the names of some or the link of some. www.amupl.com duplicchecker.com. Number 2, plagiarism detector.net. And www.grammarly.com. Now, something that sounds very mundane, but disadvantages of plagiarizing. Disadvantages of plagiarizing. So, what could be the disadvantages? The possible disadvantages. Well, number 1, that plagiarizing robs you of the original educational experience. You know, the process of thinking and writing, discovering, thinking, and writing. That is very exciting when you can see new meanings in your text. Now, there are some myths regarding plagiarism, and none of these, obviously, a myth is not true. So, number 1, dead writers have to be cited. Right? So, you know, dead writers depends on how long ago they died. I mean, for example, Grimm's fairy tales or Arabian Nights may not need to be cited. But an author who expired last year will need to be cited. Number 2, paraphrasing requires citation. Blogs online, they have to be cited because they are only free in terms of reading. But if you don't cite them, you are in trouble. Dictionaries, encyclopedias, information on calendars also needs to be cited. Songs and storylines taken from Hollywood, they need to be cited. If they plagiarize, it's a plagiarism. Lectures by professors, they have to be cited. Now, do you have the quiz? No? No, you don't have it. All right. I'm asking a few questions Say yes or no. If you copy and paste a paragraph from a website without enclosing it in quotation marks and referring to the source, is it plagiarism?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, madam.
Yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
ma'am.
It should be in comma.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Good. Use the ideas of another author without providing a reference.
It is also plagiarism.
Is it?
Yes,
Yes,
plagiarism.
ma'am.
Yes, yes, ma'am.
Plagiarism.
Yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Yes. Work. Claim work produced by another as your own. Is it plagiarism?
Yes.
Yes, madam.
Yes, yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes, ma'am.
plagiarism. Yes, ma'am.
Copy a diagram. Copy a diagram on a data table from a website, providing a reference for the source underneath.
No, no, ma'am.
It's not plagiarism, madam.
No.
It's not
But there can
plagiarism.
be a copyright issue, maybe.
Maybe. You will solve the copyright issue once people value. Submit all your parts as one paper to two different magazines. Submitting a paper to two different journals for publication. Is it plagiarism?
It's unethical. Unethical.
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Yes, unethical.
Ma'am.
Yes. Yes, that's plagiarism. Copying words from a book into your own work, but use quotation
Yes, ma'am.
marks around them as citation. A quotation with a citation. Is it plagiarism?
No, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
No, it's not plagiarism. Include a fact saying in your assignment, which is generally known. That is, for example, the sun rises every morning.
It's not a plagiarism, madam, I believe.
Not
No,
a
ma'am.
plagiarism, ma'am.
You cannot.
No, ma'am.
But
No, ma'am.
It is a
it
universal
is,
truth.
yes, it's very good. Incorporating text from another source, changing one or two words, and providing a citation. Is it plagiarism?
No, ma'am.
Yes.
No, ma'am.
No, ma'am. No. We can write emphasis added if required, if we are changing one or two words.
No, but you need a citation. If you're changing words, then it is plagiarism.
Citation is required, definitely.
Yes. So whenever you have a citation, it is not plagiarism. That's the golden rule. All right. Now I have time for your questions. If you encountered plagiarism, if you're having difficulty, if you've had some experience of student plagiarism and corrected it, do share, please.
Hello, ma'am. Ma'am, but this quotation and citation is up to a certain limit as per the university rule. Like in my university, only 10% quotation and citation is allowed.
Yes. So it is only for 10%. If there is a barrier of that kind, then you have to stay within the given norms.
Ma'am, may I ask a question?
Sure.
Ma'am, I have a bit of a concern regarding the self-plagiarism thing. Like, if I quote myself, for example, I am trying to reproduce my own PhD thesis and trying to publish it. So, in that case, what are the norms that I need to follow so that it doesn't fall under self-plagiarism?
No. See, if you are publishing your PhD thesis, then you say this is my PhD thesis. After a few revisions, I publish. That's not plagiarism.
Okay, ma'am. And in certain cases, if I want to cite my own work, my another work, so in that case, I have to cite my that work properly so that it doesn't fall under self-plagiarism, right?
Yes,
Okay, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
yes, good. Anybody else?
Ma'am, there are several authors who inadvertently self-plagiarize without maybe even realizing it. And in case if we directly confront them with questions, then they even say that it is, they take the shelter of T.S. Eliot's argument that it is impossible to be original all the time. So they say that, okay, tradition and individual talent, so I may have borrowed from Shakespeare, Chaucer, and so many others. And it's okay if I borrow from myself as well, because then that defines me. So how do we go about citing from such authors? Because what I've done is I had taken something from Dustin Pickering, and he had in turn cited from Judith Butler, obviously. But when I refer to Judith Butler, I could see that his argument and her argument is the same. And when I had cited, I had originally written from Dustin Pickering. So the editor said that no, this is not Pickering's argument, this is Butler's argument. Unfortunately, both of them have published at the same time. Now, whom do I cite?
You cite the first one.
But ma'am, both of them have actually published the thing at the same time. So one of the journal has come out in sometime in 2002 in Penn State Journal around August, and the other one is also in August, okay, in the same year. So how do I judge? Okay, I do understand that Pickering is capable of borrowing from Judith Butler, but then I've got no proof. So what do I do?
Well, Judith Butler is the better known of the two.
So
She
just
has,
because she's more well known, I should cite her. Okay, all right, ma'am. Okay.
anyone else with a query or an issue?
Ma'am, I have a question or I have a doubt. Sometimes we are using in social science like this type of word, customer satisfaction, work-life balance, and we are checking this type of three word. We are getting there has been caught by plagiarism software, and it is underlined by and the number of the percentage of plagiarism is high by showing this type of word, work-life balance or employees' job satisfaction. So how we can reduce that things? Or is there, this will be considered as a plagiarism?
That is how you should reduce the work-life balance. Are you plagiarizing?
Sometimes we are repeating this type of word repeatedly in our documents or in our writing article. So it's
Repeating words do show as plagiarism in the plagiarism report.
Suppose we are checking it in Quillboard or any other software. This is showing sometimes these three words that means repeatedly three words are showing caught by the software.
In the plagiarism software. So they
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
They would show, and perhaps you could reduce the amount of them. And sometimes, plagiarism checkers The count keys we did not think of. The shouting
And when we are sending this type of articles in good journal, they are rejecting for this purpose.
yes, that is likely to happen, but they will review it. But then you have to make sure that since this technical report is going to be looked at through the journal. So you will have to
Okay, ma'am.
you have used this word.
Okay, ma'am. Okay, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Yes. Time still for a few more queries. No more questions?
Ma'am, may I ask?
Yes.
मैम मैम जहाँ तक प्लेगरिज्म की बात है तो एज ए माई लैंग्वेज का टीचर हूँ आई एम हिंदी एंड अंगिका फ्रॉम भागलपुर यूनिवर्सिटी एंड आई एम अनिल कुमार तो एज एग्जांपल मान लेते हैं कोई प्रेमचंद्र के साहित्य पर रिसर्च कर रहा है या दिनकर के साहित्य पर रिसर्च कर रहा है तो रिसर्च में उनका बर्थ प्लेस और वर्क कुछ कॉमन चीज है जो देना जरूरी होता है तो जब किसी भी साइट पर उसको अपलोड करते हैं उसको मतलब कितने परसेंट आपका प्लेगरिज्म है कॉपी किए हुए हैं तो इसमें तो वो सारी चीजों को वो काउंट कर लेगा जिसको रिमूव करना पॉसिबल नहीं है तो फिर हाउ इट्स ए सॉल्व दिस प्रॉब्लम
ये तो वो करेगा कि वो सारे नेम्स को काउंट करेगा और उसको प्लेजरिज्म मानेगा. अब इट डिपेंड्स कि आप कहाँ भेज रहे हैं इसे. इफ इट इज फॉर योर ओन रीडिंग पर्पसेस.
इसके पहले अगर कोई वर्क किया हुआ है मैम तो बर्थ प्लेस तुम जैसे प्रेमचंद्र का कर रहे हैं दिनकर की कर रहे हैं मैथिली शरण गुप्त का मतलब वो तो ऑब्वियसली है कि वो कोई इंसान तो है नहीं वो तो सारे को काउंट कर लेगा.
नहीं, वो सारे को काउंट करता है मगर आपको रिड्यूस करना पड़ता है. यही चीज रिड्यूस करनी पड़ती है कि आपने कितनी बार ये नाम यूज किए.
जी
उसके ऑल्टरनेटिव्स ढूंढिए. नेम्स के ऑल्टरनेटिव्स. द राइटर, इस तरह से करिए. लेखक.
जी जी नाम को यूज नहीं करना है.
हाँ, कम कर दीजिए.
जी
Yes? Anything else?
चारू मैम म्यूट कर लीजिए. चारू मैम
All right. Any other queries?
I wave, I exist. Every wave.
Excuse me, ma'am. Ma'am, I'm Sarita. May I ask the question, ma'am?
Yes, of course.
Ma'am, if we are taking our student when they are doing their research project, so many problems came. As if we are considering vocabulary problem, they don't know how to write or from where we are going to collect the vocabulary or associated vocabulary. So there is some software or some other site we can refer those sites to our students.
Yes, of course. You know, the site that I gave you, Purdue Owl. Yes.
And ma'am, what about writing skills? As you have told us, OWL. Besides this, we have any other site?
There are plenty of sites. There are the BBC sites.
Okay, ma'am.
And
Ma'am, any other idea, please? Could you share if we are contributing to the students, way how they are
yes,
conducting their research project?
are no free sites. The student will have to register in a writing program or a speaking program online.
Yes, ma'am.
These are periodically announced in universities. All
Thank
right?
you, ma'am. Ji, thank you, ma'am.
All right. If there are no more queries, then let me say it was a pleasure being with you. Enjoyed this session. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you,
Thank you,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you,
Thank
ma'am.
you.
Thank you,
Thank
ma'am.
you, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
हाँ फ्रेंड्स, जैसा मैं देख रहा हूँ कल रूटीन में क्विज है, तो क्विज में क्या पूछा जाएगा, किन्हीं को कोई जानकारी है, पता है, बता सकेंगे फ्रेंड्स? कोई बताएंगे क्विज में क्या पूछा जाएगा, किस तरह का? नहीं कोई जानकारी हो तो कृपया शेयर करें।
सर जिन्होंने पहले करा है उनके अकॉर्डिंग यही है कि जो क्लासेस चल रही हैं उन्हीं में से पूछा जाता है और कहीं से नहीं आता।
हाँ, तो क्वेश्चन एक पूछा जाए, किस तरह का कुछ आइडिया अगर आप लोगों को हो
क्विज
तो?
टाइप में होगा, मल्टीपल चॉइस क्वेश्चन होंगे, 20 क्वेश्चन होंगे आपके पास, और जो क्लासेस चल रही है इनमें से जो भी सब्जेक्ट मैटर कंटेंट का है इनमें से आएगा सर। ठीक है सर।
ओके ओके। और ये टीबीए क्या होता है सर? टीबीए लिखा हुआ है, फिर पीर असेसमेंट भी है। असेसमेंट में तो अभी तक कुछ मिला नहीं है, ऐसा कोई
टीबीए मतलब
गाइडलाइन
सर,
में भी पीर
टीबीए
असेसमेंट के बारे
मतलब
में
सर टू
देखने
बी
को नहीं
अनाउंस।
मिला।
टीबीए मीन्स टू बी अनाउंस। क्लासेस अभी डिसाइड नहीं हुई है, वहाँ पर कौन पढ़ाएंगे आपको, तो अभी वो अनाउंस
अच्छा
की
अच्छा
जाएंगे।
अच्छा।
हाँ, मतलब अकॉर्डिंगली जैसे ही अरेंज होंगे टीचर्स तो करा जाएगा। एक वो पीयर असेसमेंट भी लिखा है,
थैंक यू।
पीयर असेसमेंट में अभी देखते हैं क्या होता है। अदरवाइज पीयर असेसमेंट में ये होता है कि आपका ग्रुप बना दिया जाता है और हम लोग आपस में एक दूसरे को
अच्छा
मार्किंग करते हैं। जो भी लास्ट ईयर हम सब साथ में रहे हैं, उस जो सॉरी लास्ट ईयर नहीं, ये जो हम क्लासेस में रहे हैं उसके अकॉर्डिंग हमें
हाँ
अपने आप को इवेल्युएट करना होता है पीयर असेसमेंट में। तो देखिए वो होती है
हाँ, लेकिन
एक्टिविटी अभी।
गाइडलाइन में पीर असेसमेंट में ऐसा कुछ लिखा नहीं है।
किसके बारे में सर?
पीर असेसमेंट के बारे में गाइडलाइंस
हम
में ऐसा कुछ
गाइडलाइन
लिखा
में
तो
बता
नहीं
दिया
है।
ना आपको। हाँ, वो होगा या नहीं होगा देखिए अब।
हाँ हाँ,
प्रोग्राम में तो डला हुआ है, उसमें यही
तो
होता है
ठीक
कि
है।
आपके मल्टीपल ग्रुप बना दिए जाएंगे कुछ। हाँ, इसके
जी जी जी।
कैंडिडेट के हमारे। हाँ, उसमें आपस में एक दूसरे को मार्किंग करना होगा, हमें असेसमेंट करना होगा, ये चीज रहती है। तो समटाइम्स वो लास्ट
हाँ
ईयर
बस
तो
बातचीत या
कैंसिल
हाँ
कर दी
क्विज
थी।
टाइप का, हाँ बातचीत से।
लास्ट ईयर कैंसिल कर दिया था वो इसी वजह से कि सबने अच्छे अच्छे नंबर दे दिए थे एक दूसरे को, इसलिए। हाँ, तो ये
जी
चीज
जी।
तो देखा जाएगा इसके ऊपर, इसलिए इस बार क्या होता है देखते हैं। ठीक है।
तो मीन
ठीक है
सर
ठीक
कल
है सर।
ये होने वाला है क्या? क्विज होने वाला है कल?
कल सर, कल हाँ थर्सडे को क्विज है, एज पर द प्रोग्राम शेड्यूल तो कल ही है।
ओके ओके
तो
ओके।
कल मॉर्निंग
सेकेंड
9
टाइम
टू
नहीं
10
नहीं,
क्विज
फर्स्ट
है।
टाइम
हाँ,
में ही
9
है
टू
9
10
से
क्विज।
10
हाँ, 9 से
ओके
10।
ओके ओके।
हाँ।
थैंक यू सर।
फर्स्ट टाइम में भी रूटीन है, लेकिन ये हमको लगता है सेकेंड टाइम में हो जाएगा।
हम्म।
ओके सर, थैंक यू।
थैंक यू सर।
Thank you, sir.
हैव ए नाइस डे फ्रेंड।
थैंक यू सर।